The point is, I'm not going to take the chance. If anybody asks me, why should I give him a second chance at life if at the same time I could be giving somebody else a first chance of dying? Mauritius is female. She's a woman. And she's not subtle in her seduction.
Micki, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. I am so excited for this conversation. I can't tell you. When my friend Nat suggested that he knew a criminal profiler, I thought those only existed in movies. Maybe I'm being super naive. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start with a specific question before going to the general. I've been wondering, what goes on in the mind of a serial killer? I know this is a very strange question to start with, but I've always wondered, is it nature or is it nurture? Is their mind, their brain wired in a different way to make them so? Or maybe am I oversimplifying the question?
It's a very complex answer. I don't think any baby is born bad or evil or as a serial killer. It is a process that develops, and my theory on the origin of serial killer actually links them to, if we look at the psychological, the theories of Freud, the psychosexual development phases that they go through. And then I found, if we look at the crime scene, you can see what went wrong in certain phases. If he mutilated the breast, then there's a fixation in the oral phase. Right. And so we carry on, and that's the way I started reading them. Right. So if we just generally ask what's going on in their mind, we should not make the mistake of thinking that they are crazy people. They might do crazy stuff, but they're not crazy people. It could be your brother, could be your father, could be the teacher. You know, they blend in very normal within other people. And the other day I was at our beautiful oceanarium, Oceana, and I was watching the sharks. Yeah. You know, and as the sharks glide through the other fish, the shark is just another fish. And the other fish don't know how dangerous he is until he attacks. You know, and he's very smooth, and it's that kind of thing, you know, that they blend in with everybody. So you wouldn't recognize them. Don't be looking for a crazy person. It could be your neighbor. Most of them are extremely, very normal people.
So have you noted a sort of a common thread across all the cases that you've done, that there's, I mean, surely I tell myself they must have a complete lack of empathy?
Yes.
And are you saying that this is not necessarily inbred in them? They are made so by whatever circumstances that surround them?
Yes. There's a little bit of neuropsychology that comes into play. Quite recently, neuropsychologists have established that if there is damage to your cingulate cortex in your brain, which is sort of the secretary between the top executive and the emotional brain, she sits in between. Okay. And if there is damage there, that is actually also the part of people that is responsible for learning compassion. Now, if that is damaged, now even just look at the state of bullying in schools. So if victims are bullied too much, or somebody's bullied, that part of the brain gets damaged. And then that person does not have the capacity for empathy for other people. And that's why you would often find in school shootings or bullyings that it was somebody that was bullied, the victim, who turns around and then sort of kills people or other people that bullied them.
One day they just snap.
And with a serial killer as well, I mean, they didn't have happy childhoods, obviously, you know, but there was a certain fixation, okay, which then puts them in the position that they have no empathy for their victims, or they just regard victims as objects to be discarded. You know. And if you look at the way we make a movie, you know, we can easily in a movie have the killer killing the victim, and the director says cut, and the victim gets up, but there's no second take in this. You know, he's looking for new victims every time to play the role in his mind, in his fantasy. It's all based on fantasy, on their fantasy life.
Is it kind of a dopamine hit that they're after? Is it the thrill of, I don't know, I just find it very intriguing. What do they gain personally by doing that?
I think that's a very important question, because if we differentiate them from other mass murderers, people that kill that kill multiple people. Could be human trafficking, could be armed robbers, could be just mass murders or spree killers or etc. Hostage takers, political murders, etc. Okay, they usually, you can determine what their motive is. It's usually money or whatever. Okay, with the serial killers, they themselves don't know always why they're killing. Okay, it's based upon this very deep, subconscious, intrinsic motive. Okay. And it's usually because they feel inferior, they have terrible inferiority complexes. And if you kill somebody that's omnipotent, it's godly, because you have somebody's life literally in your hands. You know, you can throttle them and let it go, and they live again, and etc. And you couple that with the sexual element, it becomes very, very strong. It makes them feel like God, and it's coupled to sexuality. The male serial killers.
The cortex element that you mentioned, have you either encountered situation, or do you personally think that such people are capable of changing?
They're not capable of changing.
They're not capable of changing.
No, definitely not. This is the one problem that I do have, because they've been sentenced to, to life sentences, most of them. But then quite recently we had one in South Africa that after 25 years he's been released. Now, let's think of it this way. When they are children, they are the outsiders, so they're the ones that have been rejected and pointed fingers at and etc. So that causes that internal hurt. Then they carry on and they kill people. Now they go to prison. In prison, they find some kind of community there after 30 years. They have a job, they start teaching, they have friends. It's not nice, but there's a community. Now we allow them out again in a broader community, where if people know them, they'll point fingers at them again. So that whole cycle of rejection is there again. Plus, this fantasy of theirs, the sexual fantasy, has been brewing for 25 years. What do they think is going to happen when you release them? They don't have access to their victims in prison, whether it be women or children or etc. But the moment you release them, they have access. And it's been brewing. What's going to happen? I don't really know of serial killers that are, just open, that haven't done it before, that won't do it again. So whose child are we going to sacrifice? So I definitely think correctional services should reconsider just willy-nilly giving parole to people or telling them, I don't know, that they should be released. They should never be released. They will always kill again.
So in your experience, or based on your professional knowledge, you would say that their brain, if I may put it like that, is so badly damaged that they are incapable of using the potential of neuroplasticity to rewire, I'm being devil's advocate, to rewire their brain so that they are capable of rehabilitation.
I think we should be careful by saying that they have brain damage, because that would excuse them.
Sure.
If we look at the legal definitions of sanity, etc., then they obviously have to be sane to be fit to stand trial. Okay. So we can also look at, but were they sane when they committed the crime, although they might have a mental illness or brain damage? Then we have a look at, was there any planning involved? Did they bring weapons, and did they remove weapons? Did they conceal the crime? Was there staging? All of that is prefrontal cortex, okay, which means they were sane enough to know. Especially if you conceal the body, then you're hiding it, or your identity. Okay, which McNaughton says, can they act accordingly, and do they know that what is right or wrong, and can they act accordingly? Okay. Well, most of them, 99% of them, are legally sane, although they do crazy things. So I'd be careful about saying brain damage. Okay, and then the other thing is, would they want to be rehabilitated? Very few of them. I know David Berkovich, one of the American serial killers, has been in prison for a very long time, and he's apologized, and etc., etc., etc. The point is, I'm not going to take the chance. If anybody asks me, why should I give him a second chance at life if at the same time I could be giving somebody else a first chance of dying? I wouldn't take that chance. Even if they say they rehabilitate, how would we know? I wouldn't take that chance. I don't think if you have a list of 10, 15, 2, 3, 4, 50 victims behind you that you deserve that.
Yeah. Why would you risk it?
Why would anybody want to risk? I wouldn't want to risk it.
So the risk in that case, maybe even if there were some argument that could be made, the risks far outweigh any potential
I think so,
benefit.
for the community, definitely. And they have a life in prison. It's uncomfortable maybe sometimes, but 25 years. They have jobs, they have friends, they're settled.
Yeah.
What are they going to do when they come outside? Who's going to employ an ex-serial killer?
I find that fascinating. Have you encountered situations where, perhaps let me go back a step, because we dive straight into the subject without really defining what a profiler does. So perhaps you could give us an idea of, is it like we see in films? What exactly does a profiler do?
Well, it's a part of forensic psychology. So we are usually employed by the police. Well, I was in the police, it just makes it easier. So I would start from the crime scene, because you read a crime scene like you would read a painting, it tells you something about the artist. It's of course not beautiful like that. But from the crime scene, you can see, is he organized, is he disorganized? Lots of deductions you can make just from the crime scene. I can already from the crime scene tell you in which phase he fixated as a child. And then you start looking for evidence. There's a lot from the crime scenes that starts telling you. Then you look at their victim selection. That tells you something about them. How did they get to the crime scene? Did they move the body? Was it left there? There's so much that it tells you. I'm going to give away all what we use.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we sit and then we compile that. Now, the idea of the profile is, because serial killers kill strangers, there is no, it's not like a husband having the wife kill or vice versa.
It's not a passionate crime of passion. Or,
you have 10 victims that didn't even know each other, and he didn't even know them. So where do you start? Okay. So the profiler's job then is to give the detectives an indication. The profiler is a tool. We give them an indication from the kind of person that you would be looking for. In the first case, our station strangler investigation, we had more than 2,000 suspects. So there has to be something for you to narrow it down. Otherwise, the investigation is just too big. That profile was about 98% correct. It was a teacher. So you narrow it down for them. So that's the first part. Now we know who we're looking for. Okay. Then we follow up leads and etc. It's good detective work as well. Then eventually, when we have our suspect, then we give them ideas of what would you find in the house. Okay. That's collateral evidence. Okay, and then also we work out an interrogation strategy for the person.
To get that to confess, for example.
To get them to confess. So there's a lot. And then we testify in court, and then we even go to prison afterwards to do research. But that's just the job of the profiler. Then there's also the forensic psychologist, that we can profile white-collar crime. Then we're looking at the dark triad, your narcissistic and your psychopath and your Machiavellian personalities. So there's a lot of white-collar crime going on. I don't know if everybody's trained in identifying them. And how do you approach them, and what would they do? So that's a different kind of profile. Stalkers is a different profile. There are quite a few ranges of profilers, rapists, etc., where it's a tool that I think law enforcement, the police, and the lawyers can really use. Then on the other hand, of course, we have custody cases. That's not profiling, but that's forensic psychology. And then where we testify in court. Now, people should always keep in mind that when we testify for the judge. So it doesn't matter if the defense or the state calls you, you're an expert for the judge. Somebody's going to pay your bill because they're using your hours, but that doesn't buy your opinion.
Yes. So you have to be unbiased in your opinion. You're acting in the... Yes. For the benefit of the court.
Yes. And then usually in my testimony, I say that, there are 5 pillars. First of all is my clinical observation of the person. Then their narrative, what do they tell me? Collateral, what did other people tell me? And then the research, and if you bring all of that together, and psychological tests, we've got specific tests for court. Okay. And if all of that concurs, then you have an unbiased report that is an expert professional, which is what the judge expects. If something does not corroborate, then you explain it. You're not there to defend or this or that or whatever. So then you explain it. And you always keep in mind you're there as an expert for the judge, not for the defense or the state. Then you're doing your job.
Have you come across a situation during your many decades of experience where either the person who you thought would be, not that particular person, the profile wasn't at all the profile who you thought it would be, or the other way around where no.
Sorry.
So you got 100% success rate.
I wouldn't say
at least
100.
in terms
Yes,
of
it was.
profiling.
Yeah, the profiles were between 95 and 98% fitted.
And is
Fitted.
that, would you say it's a skill that you had to hone over time?
Yes, I think so. I think definitely. Well, I think, I have a doctorate degree in psychology. I think that helps. I was in the police, and we always had the understanding I would teach them, they teach me. To me, teaching is an exchange.
Yes.
With years, yes, you read up a lot. I was trained by the ex-FBI profilers as well, and some of the other countries as well. So I was very well trained by them. But yes, it's definitely has to do with experience. When you think about, there's so many little things. What is the difference between dismemberment and disbowelment? Just interesting case during Jack the Ripper case in England. Jack the Ripper had his specific victims, but at the same time, there were the Thames murder cases. And people thought they overlapped.
Right.
Now, if you look at it from a very scientific experience point of view, you could see that Jack the Ripper disemboweled his victims,
Okay.
while the Thames murder dismembered them.
What's the difference?
The one is cutting them up and,
Yeah.
playing around with the interest, and the other one's cutting off the limbs so
I
that you don't
see.
identify.
Clean.
Yeah, that you don't identify the person. So that's a lot of concealment.
I see.
While Jack left his victims where they were, that's a bit disorganized. So two completely different kind of people. But you wouldn't know that if you don't have experience just to look at it. There's a difference between cruelty and violence and sadism. Violence, if we think of the French Revolution, there was violence in the street. So violence erupts like a volcano. Sadism is ice cold. It's particular. Calculated. Okay. So there's a big difference between, we cannot call everybody a sadist just because they're violent. Okay. There's a big difference, and there's little nuances that comes with experience. There's so much to it.
Yes.
There's a specific term for a woman that falls in love with a criminal. At the moment in South Africa, there's a big case of Dr. Nandipa Magudumane, and she fell in love with Thabo Bester, and she's a doctor. And she was
Was she his doctor?
No, she was just a beautiful doctor. She had this clinic for skin, and she was an influencer, beautiful, beautiful woman. And Thabo Bester was this big-time crook. He ran companies from inside prison. He would have a birthday party.
He was a hustler.
Yes, he had this big media company, and everybody came to his birthday, the big celebrities. And he would be there because he's now overseas, and he'd sit there and they'd have this whole thing. And he's in a prison cell while he's doing that. And then eventually, somehow, she helped, and they smuggled in a dead body into his cell, which they set alight, and they escaped. Okay. He escaped. But his ego was so big, that he was spotted shopping in Sandton with her, and then they fled, and eventually, they caught them and they're on trial. And a woman falling in love with a man like that, that's called hybristophilia. And there's a specific reason and theory behind that makes this whole science of profiling really, really interesting if you get into, the details of it.
Oh, that's fascinating. I want to know the answer though. So what pushes a woman to do that?
I've got my own YouTube channel. You can
go
check
that.
Profiler on Record. But it's all there, so it's really interesting stuff. It's really, really interesting.
And have you ever been, I wouldn't say disappointed, but have you ever been, let me rephrase it. Are you able to do your job whilst remaining completely unattached emotionally to the outcome?
You're supposed to, but you're human, and it's difficult, I think. When I was in the police, and I did this with the detectives around you, when you're on a crime scene, it is quite horrendous. And I don't think any people can imitate that. People try and imitate it in the music, the movies, etc. You cannot. You cannot imitate the smell of it. Maggots sounds, when they eat a body, sound like newspaper being crumpled.
Oh, gosh.
You cannot imagine that until you're there. But you're in a team and you're professional. But afterwards, yes, it gets to you. And this is something, one of my pet peeves is people on social media, and they have their own little channels and etc. And they really go for the gore. I call that synthetic sensationalism. I would never put gore just to get clickbait, because once you've seen it, it's not something that
You can
that you would
unsee.
think is heroic or make money from, or I don't know. People say, who's your favorite serial killer? Do you know what you're saying if you're saying that? They are victims. People suffered. You cannot imagine it. So I don't think it's something that should be turned into heroism or synthetically, sensationalized. My channel is specifically, it's academic, it's professional, will teach you. I use old paintings as examples. I keep it clean and classy and etc.
Sure.
So yes, of course it touches you. I'm a psychologist by profession. I have a practice. It touches you. If there's domestic violence or etc., of course it touches you.
Do you find it's not this the wrong word. I was going to say coping mechanism, but
That's fine.
are there ways of dealing with that? Because sometimes we see it as lawyers. I don't do criminal law, thankfully, but I've asked this question to my friend Nataraj or friends who do family law. Where there are children involved, how do you ensure that you're able to continue to exercise your profession whilst remaining sane yourself?
I also think, before I answer the question, it applies to lawyers, to police officers, to hospitals, to doctors, etc. Lots of people, I think, suffer from post-traumatic stress or burnout or compassion fatigue that they're not even sure if they have it. Okay. The first thing is identifying it, and then seeking help for it. And we find our ways. I'm very lucky to the island, and I'll speak about the island just now, and by the sea calms me down. So I'm really lucky, sitting. You find your ways, little meditations or little things, dogs chasing each other on the beach.
Yes.
Laughter of children. There's so many myriad of little things that makes it worthwhile. Having a life sentence, that makes worth it. Somebody that abuses his wife and he's being arrested, that makes it worth it. There's still a lot of cop inside me.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah, is that one of the reasons you moved to Mauritius, because of the sea, or is there something in particular that attracted you to the island?
South Africa is very violent, and I'm single, and there's always been a lure. About 7-8 years ago, we came looking, one of my cousins and I liked it. And what I found about Mauritius is female. She's a woman, and she's not subtle in her seduction. If you think of it, of earth, wind, water, and fire, we don't just have fire, we have a volcano. We don't just have water, we have an ocean. There's not just wind, there is a cyclone. And the earth is this rich soil, volcanic soil. And she makes me think of a Sega dancer at night, because there she is. There's usually a little fire. There's fire. The wind is blowing in her hair, and the sea is behind her, and the sand is beneath her feet. And she's just passionate. And that's how Mauritius took my heart. It's just, if you land on the airport and you smell the island and you're back and you just feel alive. I think the island is very much alive. I think it's very beautiful. I think we have problems on the island. Of course, we have corruption. And we have drugs, which is very big, and we have domestic violence, and we have bullying. So we have our problems. But the Mauritian people are very family orientated. And I think that is a strength that we shouldn't let go.
Yeah, and I think everything is a matter of perspective as well, because as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I lived in the UK for a long time, and it's easy to compare certain things. Little things like the convenience culture that exists there. It's a bit more inconvenient to some respects here, but at the same time, everything is a matter of perspective. You spoke about violence. Although we do have pockets of violence, I don't think it's incomparable to the violence that you have probably endured or witnessed in SA.
Yes.
And the violence tend to be, yes, there's a drug issue, but then we hear of crimes of passion as opposed to, cold-blooded killers going around or school shootings or what have you. It's always lovely to hear that people loving our island. Because
I think we should be prepared though, with school shooting. It can happen, and somebody says Mauritius doesn't have a serial killer. No, they don't. They had one before. He's in prison. But what if there is one? The country will erupt.
Yes.
It will be set on fire, and I think they need to be prepared for it. Where that's where I'd love to train, and exchange knowledge, even in the white collar crime. There's a lot, Sometimes I see, oh, but they're importing, people from overseas. I thought, but I'm right here.
Exactly, use me. Yes.
Yeah,
And
please.
and especially
So-
I think the white collar crime is a very interesting aspect, because I think crime is becoming more and more sophisticated. And the crimes that one was perhaps used to 100 years ago, where people would be more physical, now it's more insidious and silent, and it's simmering, but it's there. I think we all know it's there. And I think that one of the things that I find particularly frustrating is and that's probably why I chose not to do criminal law, is that sense of injustice, because you feel that, particularly as regards white collar crime, you ask yourself the question, which one of them has ended up behind bars? Because you hear stories about, I remember a few years ago, there was a story about this man who stole some lychees from a garden of someone and got 6 months in prison. Or maybe he had a history of crime, etc. That doesn't excuse his behavior. And then you hear of much, much worse white collar crimes, and nothing's happening. The system gets blocked. There are procedural issues. So yeah, there's that sense of, I don't know, I just felt sometimes that things are really unjust, but maybe part of the solution is people like you who have the training and the knowledge and the expertise to bring to that conversation.
Imagine, if you start teaching banks, people that deal with clients, even if just once somebody can say, hang on, this rings a bell, somebody taught me something about this. We've got the FCC, they're doing wonderful work. Okay. But there's so many areas, that people can use the knowledge. The knowledge is there, and the research has been done, So the DPP, there's so many places where, where we can just depart knowledge. And if it helps just once, it's going to help, And I feel everybody can make just a tiny little difference and help justice and make the world a better place. Just a little thing can make a big difference.
For sure, definitely. Have you been involved here yet in a either in a court case or
not officially?
In a
no.
Okay.
I would like to, but not officially. I've given advice and so and so, and I've done some training with PedoStop to the lawyers, and hopefully this year maybe to the police through PedoStop. But I'd like to be much more involved, very much.
Well, fingers crossed after that. I mean, you've got your channel, as you've explained. I understand that there's also a documentary that was made about you. You've written a book called Catch Me a Killer, is that right? Was that a fiction book or?
No, it's my autobiography. It's called Catch Me a Killer. Then quite recently, about 2 years ago, they turned it, not to a documentary, into an actual TV series.
Oh, right. Okay.
And there's a British actress, and she's called Charlotte Hope, and she played my role.
Oh, wow. I've got to look it up.
So there's 10 episodes of Catch Me a Killer. I think you can find it on Showmax. But it's now been shown all over the world, in Russia and China and America and wherever people watching this series. And it was a bit, I can't say uncomfortable, but weird in the beginning.
Did you watch the whole of it?
Yes, I watched it. They bought the rights to the books, and sometimes they deviate.
I see.
And that's when I started the profiler on record, because I just wanted to put the record straight.
Of course.
And then that carried on. It's still ongoing now, a true crime channel. It was quite accurate, and it's doing quite well. So it's interesting. Think, wow, they made a TV series about my life. I never thought about that when I was doing that. Just, it's out there.
What made you want to put pen to paper and write the book?
I've actually always been a writer.
Really?
I'm an author, a psychologist, and a profiler. But since I was a little girl, I've always wanted to write. And I was a journalist for many, many years before I studied psychology. So I always wanted to write. And I think if I look at both my parents, my mother was a social worker. So from her, I inherited compassion. My father was an academic. He was the vice chancellor of the University of Pretoria. So for him, it was more the academics and teaching. So I think that combination. And then both of them loved history. And that's where I got my love for history, and I have honors in archeology. So for a while, I stopped completely with the psychology, and I just pursued the archeology. And I was writing, in archeology. Today, I write every day. I write the scripts for the channel, and I write scripts, whatever, and we'll see if we make a follow-up. And I've written a novel. So I'm actually a writer.
where do you find the time to do all this?
I'm not married.
Good answer.
I'm not married. I don't have children, so yeah.
Amazing. Because when I read the link that you'd sent me before this conversation, I saw that you have a particular interest in biblical archaeology.
Yes.
What has ignited that curiosity in you?
I think since both my parents were interested in history, it comes from that. And I've always been fascinated by what went on. So I traveled the world to archaeological sites, and sometimes I would just sit there, and it would be as if you could feel the people that used to live there, and what they did, and you see their pottery, and I read a lot about them, and I love the historical figures, and this is where they actually worked. And I followed Alexander the Great's footsteps into Pakistan and back, and all kinds of things. I love Turkey, archaeology. I love Greek. I love the history, the Greek mythology. It's a passion of mine. So for a while, for about 10 years, I worked for an Ancient Origins, which is a site, and I wrote for them, and I even took tours for them.
Wow.
So, and then I had to get back to crime, with a television series that they make. I don't know, maybe one day I'll be able to go back into archaeology. Well, what I do at the moment as well, when I write articles, I would, let's say if I write an article about poison, then I would link it to the time of Lucrezia Borgia, etc.
Yes.
I would link it back to history. So my approach is very eclectic. If I talk about a certain crime, I will go and find it in history, because mankind committed it.
It's the same cycle over and over again.
Yes, and I think you should be aware that it's always been with us. So I definitely link it to history and give you the historical background to certain crimes, which makes it interesting, and then connect it with what's happening today. So I think in that sense, the work that I do in the site is very unusual. Nobody else does it. It's the thinking man's.
But also, it's very complementary, because the way you've described it, I mean, it doesn't seem complementary, but the way you've just explained it just now, it links to the psychology of, why are we like we are now?
Yes, and it's happened before. And I'll give you the bigger picture, which makes it interesting. You don't just want to read about how much blood and gore and blood splatter there was. That's not what it's about. It's not what it's about.
Do you have a favorite site?
Archeologically? Too many.
If you had to pick one. If you had to pick one to go next month.
I haven't been to Malta yet. I'd like to go to Malta. I love Sunyon. Sunyon is on a peninsula there's past Athens, and there's a beautiful temple of Poseidon. And then below you've got the Aegean Sea.
Lovely.
And there's a beautiful story behind that as well. That's just a very particular place to me. Also, about 2 or 3 years ago, here in Mauritius, I broke my hip.
Okay.
I was walking down the passage with my black cat, and he went into my legs, and I tripped over my cat. And I landed up in Welcome, and I had a broken hip. That was in January. But that October, November, I was taking a tour to Turkey, and there's a place called Mount Nemrut. And on top of the mountain, there's these huge heads of gods and statues and whatever. And I just decided I still want to go. So with a broken hip, it took me 9 months or whatever, and I just walked up that mountain because I always wanted to be there. And on top of the mountain, you have the whole Mesopotamia in front of you. If you know where you are and what happened there, the battles and the Hittites and the
You can
everything.
sort of imagine it in your mind.
Yeah, I don't need a lot of imagination to see it all. So that was great. I've seen many of the Göbekli Tepe. I've seen many of the places that I want to see, which I don't think everybody often goes.
Yes, yeah.
So they're very remote.
I sense in you've got this kind of thirst for, as I think it should be, for just lifelong learning, really.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And I think I got that from my father. I'll never stop learning. After I got my doctor's degree, I said I would never learn anything again in my life. And then I still got an honours degree in archaeology, and I never stop.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn, to know.
I know.
It's exciting.
And life is too short. This life, at least, it's too short to there's so much to see in the world. And I also read, and that may or may not be linked with archaeology, but I also read that you loved your time in France, or Paris. Tell us a little bit about that. Is there any particular reason why?
Yes, I was quite lucky. I had French at university as a language. And then sometime, I think after I left the police, I already wrote the book, and I got contacted by the Centre International de Sciences de Criminalité Pénale. It's an NGO in France. And they invited me to go to France to go and teach, their profile. There's actually a story behind that. When I was 10 years old, a little girl, I loved horses.
Did you ride?
Yes, I rode, and I had my own horses. And I read about the horses on the Camargue, the white horses on the beaches of the Camargue. They're wild horses. They belong to the gypsies. And I made this mental connection with the horses, and I told them, I don't know how, but one day I will find you. I will come to you.
And you were 10?
I was 10. Now, this coming from a little white girl in South Africa with all the sanctions against us. Okay, so anyway, then my life happened, and I went to university, and I did the serial killers, and then one day in France, they contacted me, these people, and they said, please come over and start teaching profiling to European profilers. So I went every year and I taught them. And while I was in France one day, the Paris Match magazine contacted me. And they said, oh, we'd like to do an article about you. I said, oh, that's fine. They said, we know you like the wind, but we want a photograph of the wind blowing in your hair.
Okay.
I said, okay. And they said, we'll send a photographer, but the only place where the wind is blowing today in France is on the south coast. So we'll fly you down. I said, oh, that's very nice, thank you. So they flew me down, and there was this photographer picked me up, and we drove out to the beach, and I saw the sign, Camargue. And I thought, can't be. And we got to the beach, and I got out, and I was standing on the beach, and the wind was blowing, and they came. A herd of white horses just came. Yes, they came running, and the photographer just clicked, and they just came running, and they snuggled up, and they said, you told us you would be coming. We waited. And this was like, wow. It's a true story. It's
literally all over.
Yes, if I think about it every time. And then I think, never give up on your passion. If life can happen, you don't know how, but it will manifest. I mean, it took me going through serial killers to get there. But I did play with them, and they wouldn't leave.
And they were wild horses. They weren't tame horses.
The real ones, yes. And you couldn't see them when I stood there in the beginning, And then suddenly they just came running. And the photographer said, look at these horses. And they came right up to me. They're wild.
They were just waiting for you all this time.
They said, you promised us you'd come. We knew you would. We waited. So that's
an
wonderful.
incredible story. No wonder you love France.
So for a few years, and of course I had friends then, I would always go, to look at the archaeology, but I was always invited to teach, to teach their profilers. So that was quite wonderful.
Do you enjoy teaching?
I do. I've taught at quite a few universities as well. Here in Mauritius at Open University and Middlesex. I do. I like the interaction. As I say, I never feel I'm teaching from a podium. There's an interaction. I can teach police a lot, but they can teach me. So I like that. And I like open minds and asking. So I really like that.
That's wonderful. Do you find, because you've worked in so many countries or with so many countries across the world, do you think the baseline in terms of the key foundational psychology behind criminality is common across the world?
Unfortunately, I think profiling per se is losing track. There had quite a few profilers, obviously, in the United States. That's where it started with the FBI. What I've heard at the moment from England is that they really don't have profilers that many anymore, and we find very few universities, they have a course in profiling, but not real. I am developing a course in profiling based upon my own experience, which I think would be a good course. But I don't think, sometimes police departments don't really understand what it can actually mean for you, how it can solve it. And I had that in the South African police.
Sure,
it was male-orientated, etc. And, there's egos and a lot of stuff. But until they realized, but this can really make a difference. And that's what it's about. It's not about who knows what. It's about, can we stop crime?
But do you think it's because of their lack of understanding, or do you think it's a resources issue? Why do you think it's...
I'm not sure, but I tend to think people ask the question and I say, well, psychology is all about people. Animals don't commit crime. People commit crime, and profiling, and that's about criminal psychology, is about the mind of the criminal. Whatever kind of criminal, whether it be a serial killer, serial rapist, a stalkist, a gangster, a white-collar criminal, etc., it's a criminal. There's a science to understanding their minds. And once you can understand them, then, you can.
Makes it
Make
easier to
success.
identify them and to
Yes.
catch them.
The person that
eventually.
understands the situation is the person that controls the situation. So I think so. Can help.
Do you have any regrets in your professional life?
My professional life. I don't know. Maybe she just married a rich man. Just a joke. No.
Fall in love with a criminal.
Yeah, no,
I'm joking.
No, I don't know. It's pointless. You know, it was my life.
Yes.
It still is. When
Yes.
I love the traveling part of it. I love that I can go and do whatever I want. I love the passion behind it. I really like the fact that it's making a difference, making the world a better place, and I hope that's inspiring people to do it. My mother's always said, angels go where devils fear to tread. She said, you dance to a different drum, which is true, I suppose. Yes, my life it's not always happy, but I'm never really in pursuit of happiness. So
I don't think life is meant to be
no,
like this
it's
anyway.
definitely not.
Otherwise,
It's up and down and it's exciting.
Yeah.
So I think I have a soul of a traveler. Maybe I would have been a pirate. I don't know.
Maybe another
pirates
life,
are criminals. Yeah.
Is there? I mean, it's a shame to hear that. In your view, that profession is slowly dying or slowly disappearing. But for the young person who's watching us and finds this field fascinating and would like to go either study it or part of it, what advice would you have for them?
See, that is the part to me that is sad. Okay, because they contact me and they say, where can we go and study? Well, you need a master's degree in psychology, I think. And then there isn't really,
right.
There is some of them and they have courses, but it's not in depth. That's why I'm busy at the moment writing such a course, so that I hope there will be some university out there that I can get it established and then I can teach them. You can't just teach anybody. They have to have certain qualities. Well, a master's degree, it's not for the faint-hearted. There needs to be strength, character strength, etc. When you do this, the same with the detectives. It's difficult, but I would love to leave a legacy one day where they could have studied, and where my legacy is there for them to learn from. One day, not that I have exit plans at the moment, we never know, but it's there.
But I hope, I mean, I'm surprised though, because I would have thought that in this day and age, we need more of the type of people like you, not less. So I'm surprised that it doesn't form at least part of a curriculum that should be teaching that.
There's some of it, but I don't think they're in depth. And I don't think this is a career that AI can take over.
Absolutely.
I don't think
agree
so.
With you. Yeah, I think there are subtleties in human behavior in terms of, obviously we have 5 known senses.
Yes.
I think we probably have some unknown senses as well. I don't think a machine can pick up on these.
No, I can't. I don't think it can pick up your intuition. Intuition is a real thing. It's not just a sixth sense. It has to do with your gut, and your senses communicating with your gut, telling you stuff that we sometimes ignore, but it's there. But you have to be in touch with it.
Exactly.
And many detectives have intuition. They might not even know that they have it, but you just know. I think that's really important. I don't think any technology can take over that.
Yes, I agree. I think I was talking to someone, actually I did a course which the ER group organized. I'm not doing the advertising, but I just love the course so much that I'll mention it very quickly. It's called Mindscape, but it's just a name. I think the principles can be taught in other ways. And it is about harnessing intuition.
Yes.
Because I think, the universe is what it is. All the information is there.
Yes.
It's about what you're tuning into.
Yes.
Or what you choose or choose not. And with all life's distractions, I think people get really engrossed quite easily in scrolling up and down their phone, and then they lose that sense of intuition.
I also think, if you go back, what I'd love to do as well is look at cold cases, because some of your intuition, there's always just a little something, that might be, I love crime scenes because it takes a lot of detail. Every little thing needs to be explained. And if there's a rush, then
you miss stuff.
You miss something. So I love digging into old cold cases and seeing.
Have you ever solved or helped solve a cold case?
Not officially.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then.
Not officially, but I'd love to, because now you have the time in the world, you know. I don't know, you see it on TV sometimes, scratching in the boxes and giving. I would love to have the opportunity to, because I really think I have the time and I think I can do it.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, there's always closure, that people need closure, you know.
Definitely.
So,
definitely. Well, hopefully you'll manifest it.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, Micki. I've
Thank
really
you,
enjoyed that conversation. Would you mind just telling people the name of your channel in case they want to go and watch it?
Thank you. The channel is Micki Pistorius, Profiler on Record. That's the YouTube, and then there's a Micki Pistorius on Substack and Patreon and etc. But I've got a very good social media person, and if you type it in, you'll find it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Micki.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you.